All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Tom Linton from Yellowfin North America here, coming at you with another Yellowfin University video. In this video, it's going to be the second or third video, depending on where they place it in the site, but it's going to be on how to call web services, specifically the single sign-on, SSO, in C# or .NET in general. We'll be using CSharp today to actually code this, so we can see what happens. Of course, there is the flavor of VB.NET. I think if you see this in C#, you could pretty much change it to VB. Really not too different, just maybe the difference in syntax, but everything should look pretty much the same. So we're going to start this from just a blank project here in Visual Studios, and we're going to call our web services, and we're going to return back that token from the single sign-on web service, and then we'll paste the link location into the browser with that token, and we will show that we can actually sign on to Yellowfin, single sign-on into Yellowfin. The first thing we are going to do is bring up the wiki here. Let's open up the developer toolkit. We'll go down to the Web Services API and enabling web services. So we're talking about .NET today. We could go through this, and the beginning here just tells us, hey, you have to go into administration, the admin console, go to the role that you want to be able to call it admin services with, or web services, and turn on web services, as you can see there. That has to be done first. This second part, this enabling JAX web services, this is going to be important for the .NET version, or calling us in .NET, I should say. We've just had real good success with the JAX web services. So the first thing you want to do is enable JAX web services. You can see, very easy to do. You open that web XML file located in this directory, and we already got the code in there. All you have to do is uncomment it. So if I was to do that, I believe mine's already uncommented, but we may as well just show what that looks like. So if I was here at my Yellowfin folder, I would go into App Server, Web Apps, Root, WebInf, and WebXML. Go ahead and click Edit, and up pops my WebXML. Simply do a little search here for JAX, and hey, there it is. Uncomment this section. As you can see, I have already uncommented it. It's from here to here, and we've turned on JAX web services. So this is going to be important for us when calling web services in .NET. Again, this is just the preferred web service, that JAX web service. So once you uncomment this here, you can go ahead and save that file. And what you're going to need to do in this instance, and actually let me bring this over here so I can get it out of the way. After you've done that, you've saved it, you need to actually restart Yellowfin just so Yellowfin picks up the new web XML parameter here. It knows, oh, hey, I need to turn on JAX web service. So if we scroll down here just a little bit, and actually it might be at the calling web services here, but yeah, we'll move on to the next one, which is calling the web services. The first thing I want to talk about is the .NET integration here, which is, can we make sure that JAX is enabled? So once you save that, you restart Yellowfin, you need to get your endpoint URL. And that's what this is here. So it's just saying, go to your Yellowfin website /web services hello, and we should see this. So let's see what we get here. Let me go to my instance of Yellowfin, and we'll do /web services hello, and hello, we got what we're looking for here. So here is the legacy administration service. That's what we want, the administration service. We're not doing report service right now. And here is our endpoint URL, the WSDL. Let's go ahead and copy this, because what I need, and I'll click on this just so you can see, here is the actual web service. So you could look through here and see exactly what you need to be able to call web services. But the reason I need that WSDL, this address here, is I'm going to be pasting that as a service reference within my Visual Studios. Now back into Visual Studio, we need to add that service reference we were just talking about. So let's right-click the reference under the Solution Explorer here, and we'll say Add Service Reference. And here's that address that we have copied that we're going to paste into here, and click Go. And hey, it found the Legacy Administration Service. So now that it found that, let's rename this. We want to call this Yellowfin here, so I know what namespace this is. And we're going to be using that namespace, right? So why not add it to the top? So using Yellowfin, well, I guess we have to say using console3 app dot Yellowfin. There we go. Now we have that, we can use it down here. Just needed to add it to our using. So the first thing we want to do, here I'll make some space for us, is we want to initiate our, we want to create some variables actually first off, and we want to do that with our administration service response. So that's going to house the response that we get back, and it's going to have everything in a nice, neat class or namespace, whatever you want to call it with .NET. So that way we can say, response dot status code, response dot login session ID. That's so we need to create that variable. We need to create the request. We need to create the person. So the person's going to be who we're logging in, and that gets attached to the request. And then finally, we need to initiate the administration service client, and that's going to be the client that actually shoots off the request to Yellowfin, and Yellowfin returns back the response for us. So let's go ahead and initiate those variables. So we'll do some private variables here, private static administration, and look at all this. Because I have that reference in here, it pops up with everything. So the first thing we're going to do is create the request. So private static administration service request. Let's call it request. Let's be clever. All right. Administration service request. We're going to call that request. We got to do the exact same thing here for the administration service response. And here is our response. We'll call it response. Make everything intuitive, right? Why not? And the last two we need to do is private static administration person. There it is. Administration person. We'll call them, yep, you guessed it, person. The last thing we need to create is the actual web service variable, private static. Whoops, that's not going to be admin. It's going to be legacy administration service client. There we go. And we can call it web service. Why don't we just call it client? Why not? There we go. All right, we got some variables created now. What we want to do is use those guys in our actual main here. So if I come down to my main, what we need to do is instantiate those. So let's go ahead and instantiate the request first. So request equals new administration. Why did I capitalize that? Administration service request. Yes. All right. Let's get that response instantiated as well. Let's see if it pops up if I just type in response. Oh, it does. How cool is that? Administration service response. But why did I do that? All I need is response. There we go. Equals new administration. Now I need it. Administration service response. Awesome. And we just need to instantiate the last two, which is person equals new administration person. And how cool is that? It comes up with exactly what I need. And finally, I guess I'll separate this one because it's not request, response, or person. It's going to be the actual client. We need to initiate that, which, what do we call it? Client equals new legacy administration. Oops. Oh, that's what happens when you spell things wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Legacy administration service client. There it is. Cool. So we have instantiated those four objects. Awesome. But what we need to do now is actually build the request that we're sending off to Yellowfin. And how easy is this? Watch this. Request, we just need a few things here. We need the person that is going to be using web service. So the person that logs into Yellowfin's web services to make whatever changes they want in Yellowfin. So you always have a user that you're logging in as when you're trying to call web services. So that's going to be what we're attaching right now to request.loginID. It is not the person that we're going to log in and let them have their session and play around within Yellowfin. That's going to be the administration person up here, person. So this is the person again. I just like to harp on it. It's going to be the person that is actually logging into the web services. So I'm going to use my admin account here, and I can hard code that because, again, this isn't going to change unless for some reason I want to have a different web service account in the future. But I want all my web service calls to go through admin@yellowfin.com.au. And I want all of my, or I want my password, or I know my password, I should say. My password is super secret. Awesome. Don't tell anybody. Now, what else do we need? What else do we need to pass in here? Well, let's see. I need the request dot. And, you know, you may be saying, well, how do you know what to pass in here, Tom? What are you looking at? Well, let's go back to the single sign-on here, and let's click on the login user. That's the function that I'm calling. Here's what the request element needs. It needs a login ID, a password, the org ID, the function that we're calling. In this case, we're calling login user. We'll talk about that in a second. We need to pass in that person. So you can see here, the person object holding the details of the user that needs to be logged in. Okay, so again, the person that needs to be logged in, and that's that person object that we made, which is going to ask for a user ID and a password. So this is how I know what I'm supposed to be entering here. Let's go ahead and bring us back here. Request dot, so we needed an org ID, which it's always going to be one, secret. Always going to be one, as it says on that document there. And then we need to say, hey, the org ID is specified here, guys. Okay, so that's going to be true. Awesome. So now we have the login ID, the password, the org ID, and yes, org ID is specified. The last two things we need to do here is request.function. So what are we going to call? What are we trying to do? We want the function set to login user in this case. And just a side note, if you want to log in a user without using their password, you can just say login user no password. However, to do that, you do need to make an update to the configuration database. And if I go again back to my single sign-on here in the wiki, I click on the function, login user no password, and you'll see it's the exact same call, except for you have to go to your configuration database, Yellowfin's configuration database, and insert these four values. Well, I should say it's one row, 4 different columns, into the configuration table in the Yellowfin configuration database. So one system, simple authentication, true. Once you enter that, restart Yellowfin, and now you're going to be able to use that login user no password. So that's what you need to do there. We're going to do the login user because there's more, meaning I have to actually pass in a password. So this is like the complete login user request. To do the login user no password, all you do is leave out the password on the administration person. No big deal. Just want to show you with the most amount of content, and if you have to cut anything out, for example, doing the login user no password, you've seen everything, so you know what to cut out. So back to my code here. I'm doing, in this case, again, we're going to do login user, not login user no password. And then I need to create the person that I'm logging into. So person.user ID, who am I logging in? I'm going to log in myself. tom.linton@yellowfin.bi. Bingo. And again, I am not doing the no password thing, so I need to provide my password to Yellowfin, which is going to be super secret. Again, awesome. So one thing to note here is let me add my semicolon. If I was making an actual web application, I would not be hard coding the person's user ID and password. This would be dynamic. Maybe I get it from the session in my web application that I have, or what have you. Maybe I have it stored in a database somewhere, but I don't want to make this static. What I want to do is make it dynamic. And to do that in .NET, I think you do something like this. You know, if I had that, maybe some context that was the username, a variable that stored the username from the session, I would do that. So when the person's logging in, it'll go grab that username and it will log that person in instead of me every time, right? So this is where your code needs to be dynamic, the user ID and the password. So you'd have username like that, and then do the same thing down here under password, except for you'd have, these two brackets, squiggly brackets, the word password or whatever that variable is, and then the two closing squiggly brackets. So for now, this isn't a web application. I'm just doing this in the console. So we'll leave this back to the hard-coded tom.linton@yellowfin.bi. Awesome. Got my password. Now we just need to attach the person to the request. So it's request.person equals person. Awesome. All right, so now we have everything, right? We have our entire request built. What we need to do now is actually make the request. And so we're going to house that again in that response variable, not variable, but that response object that we have. So let's go ahead and say response equals, what's our client? Client.remote administration call. And the argument this takes is the request. What do you know? Pretty intuitive. All right, so what do we have here total from line, let's call it from up here, from line 12 to line 37. So however many lines of code that is, let's call it 25. 25 lines of code, I can sign someone in to Yellowfin, and you can see how easy this is. So I just like to make a little plug here for .NET. Just because we're a Java application, it doesn't mean we don't play nicely with Windows .NET. It can be VB.NET, ASP.NET, I don't care. This, we do play well. You can see how easy it actually is here. And guys, we're going to run into a few errors, and I'm doing this on purpose. I'm not going out and correcting them because I want you to see how they manifest. So that way, if you see it, you know how to correct it. So one thing we're going to have to change is something in the reference.cs, but we'll do that here in a second once we actually make the call. So that's the call, and now that I have that, I can say response dot, let's grab, I think it's called the status code. There we go. But what I want to do is I want to write that, of course. So I think that's under debug.write, let's say. That's what I'll use here. Oops, boom. And it's going to ask me to add that to the using. So let's go using system.diagnostics. Awesome. Okay, so I don't have any errors. Let's go ahead and run this app. And it's running, and there's the exception. There was an error in serializing body of message remote administration call request. Here's what's really interesting to us. Cannot convert type string, which is like string array, to string. So what is happening here is there's just something with the reference that when it creates or it converts that variable, it creates like string array. And that's what we're running into, and that's why we're seeing this issue. So what we need to do is, I'll just continue through this, let it run out of the debug mode there. We need to go to the Yellowfin service reference over here. And as you can see, I am in the console app 5 for Yellowfin. And what we need to do in the Yellowfin namespace here is go down to that administration service request. Boom, there it is. And actually, is it the response or the request? Well, let's find out. I'm going into the response first here because it's serializing, so it would be into the response. So now I'm in the response. What I need to do is, actually, it's in the request. What am I doing here? Let's read the error, Tom. Let's be smart. So there was an error in serializing the body of message remote administration call request, unable to generate temporary class. So that's not going to be in this one here. It's actually going to be in a different one. So let's close out. We want to be in the request. There we go. All right. So what I'm going to search for in this is I'm going to say, I want to find the word string, and then it's going to be open close bracket, and then again, open close bracket. And there it is, query results field. It's got two brackets here. Just delete that. Gonna look for this again. There's the other one right here, string. Delete that. I'm gonna search one more time, and hey, it's not finding any more of those. Awesome. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna Control S. We're gonna save that. And we're gonna get back to our console app 5 here. So I'm gonna close my reference.cs, close my object browser. Now I'm back at my program. And let's try and run Yellowfin again, or this login web service here. And what's going to happen now? Oh, it worked. Look at that. So that was the error that you are probably going to run into. when trying to call .NET services here with the Yellowfin stubs, functional stubs here. So what we did was we said, hey, write this, and I wrote this at the end. I apologize. I changed this. I had paused the screen so I could change this to debug.write. So this URL here, this localhost 7073 login i4, this is the prefix to logging somebody in. It's where we want to redirect somebody to. So you can see I've built the URL, and then I say plus response.login session ID. So what I'm going to do actually, just to make this fair, is we will comment that out. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Let's add that back over there. And what I'm going to do is comment that. Shift-C. Awesome. That's not how you comment in .NET. Hey, there we go. That looks like a comment. All right, so we're going to comment that out, and what I want to write is just kind of explore some stuff here. So I want to do debug dot, and, well, this isn't going to be the Yellowfin part of it, so why not just blow through that? So debug.write, what I want is the response dot. Okay, so here's all the different things that I can get from the response. So content type, data sources, entity ID. It's only going to return back some stuff. But what I would want if I got an error, so first things first, if I look at what I had typed in originally, which is status code, and I return this back, let's just run it. And what I'm also going to add here is, let's do plus /n. Cool. So I just want to have a new line because see what happens here, it kind of all flows into one. So let me just run that here, and we'll see what this looks like. Here we go, and boom. Okay, so here is the status code, success. So if you got a status code of failure, so I'll tell you what, let's make it a failure. I'm going to change my password there to Tez instead of test. If I got a failure, let's just show what that looks like. It's going to say failure. Not that you're a failure in life. It just means you failed at writing this code, something you did wrong. Okay, so here's my failure. Now I'd say, well, what did I mess up? I don't know what I messed up. So let's just, instead of printing the status code, let's print the error code. Boom. All right, let's run this again, and we should get a number. I bet it's going to be 25. Am I right? Oh, yes, 25 down here. You see that? That is the error code that we can look up. Again, if I go back to the wiki, is list of exceptions. And when I click on list of exceptions, we're going to see all the error codes here. And if I scroll down to 25, it's a could not authenticate user error, meaning that the user could not be authenticated. So I got my username or password wrong. In this case, I know I just got my password wrong. I can change that to test. And if I run it again, it's actually not going to return anything down here because there's no error code. Yeah, error code 0. Hey, no error code. Nice. So if I scroll up, error code 0, no error. It was a success. Awesome. So explore the response. Do response dot and take a look at all those different objects in there. Properties, because you want to see what you have to work with. So if it is a success or a failure, you can write into your app, do this or do that. But essentially your next line of code in your app, as I get rid of that, is going to be a redirect. And you want to redirect to, again, here's the beginning of the URL, plus response.login session ID. Big difference here, guys. I'm actually going to write this out because this is important. Wow, that was wrong. So debug dot blah 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 write response dot. So okay, so we have the login session ID. That's what you see down there. So I'm going to write that, and what we're also going to do is we're just going to make this extremely clear, and we're going to say login session ID plus that. Okay, so now we have that. It's going to print that out. Let's copy this whole thing. And I've seen people make this mistake before. It's super easy to make this mistake. Other session ID. So you have a login session ID, and then you have this other session ID that Yellowfin returns. If I start typing in session ID, look at that. Okay, so this is, in my opinion, why it's confusing. So if I ran this and I look at my output here, it's going to write this one on the same line. That's going to be annoying, but that's okay. We shall live. And what I should have done, I like to make things readable, guys, whenever I can help, you know. All right, so let me add this bit of code here to this bad boy, and that should get everything on a separate line except for the last one, so who cares? Last one's just the entire web address. Okay, so this is where it can be confusing. Here's your login session ID, and here's your other session ID. So just know that these are two different session IDs. Top of my head, I can't remember that session ID. It's probably your browser session ID or the J session ID. Not sure. But what you want when logging someone in is going to be this session ID, the login session ID. And that's what you append to the back of this URL. And that URL is actually on the wiki. If I go back to the administration services, single sign-on, you will see in login user, if I scroll on down here, here it is. So this redirecting to Yellowfin with the login token. Yellowfin, whatever your Yellowfin server name is, /logon.i4 ? Login web service ID equals, there's the token that you paste. So once you have that, I can actually copy this now that I have it. And just to prove that it works, let's paste this as if I redirected into my web app. Oh my gosh, look at that. It logged me in. Awesome. And the reason it popped up with that org ID is I have multiple org IDs in this. As you can see, I'm in the default client here. And actually, good lesson. While we're doing this, you're going to get some bonus content here. If I go back into my code, appeared on a different screen. So if I go back into my code and I edit the request, is this mine? Yeah. So if I edit the request here, I called the request admin. You can see I pasted some code in here. So sue me. Admin is the request. So I just had renamed it at one point when I was going through. So if I look at the request, what I want to do is also specify org-ref, and then equals, I believe the first one's 1, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong. Admin.org-ref equals 1. And actually what it is it needs a string. There we go. Awesome. So let's go ahead and save that and start. And let's wait for this to spit out. Whoops, I got a failure. See, I got a nice failure. Look at that. So that was my org-ref, and that's what I had messed up there. I put an org-ref of 1. So the reason is my org-ref is probably wrong, and this is, you know what? We're going to debug this together so I can see what I did wrong. So why not just grab this debug.write here, and let's write, instead of the session ID, let's say error code is going to be error code, boom, save. It's probably going to be something along the lines of I got my org-ref code wrong. That's all it's telling me. So if I look here, it's going to give me error code 21. Let's go look. Let's do this together. Here we go. Back to the list of exceptions. Error code 21. Invalid client reference. Meaning I got the wrong client reference ID. And that's okay because I know I got it wrong. So to get the right one, I just can't remember what it's called. So I'm going to go into my client organizations here. And the client reference ID is actually nothing to get into the main one. Makes sense, right? Look at that, nothing. But what I'm going to do here in this case is log me into a specific client so I can see one of them, my client reference ID is 2, or I kind of like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's kind of a nice one here. So let me log out. We're going to make this equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this should log me into that instance. Go ahead and start. See if I get an error this time. Hey, no error. Look at that. I got it right. So if I copy this URL here, just like that. Control C. It shouldn't ask me my org ref. So if I paste that, boom, logged me right into the correct client organization. So look at that. You got a bonus today. You not only saw how to log someone in, but you also saw how to log them into a client organization in this case. So that about does it for today. I'm sure we will have this code posted somewhere, but for now, this is how Yellowfin integrates with .NET. Obviously, it's very easy. There's only one little trick you have to do. You have to edit that reference.cs as you saw me do, where I changed the string double bracket thing to just string array instead of array of array. So that is about it. Thank you for tuning in. I know this is a long video, but hopefully it gave you all of the tools that you need to be able to use Yellowfin and to use web services with confidence. Again, we did the administration stuff today. There may be one in the future for the report side of things, but we're sticking with administration first. We also have the other video on how to do this in Java. Please check that one out if you are a Java shop. Thanks.